Hello, my name is Daniel Hodap, and we have today Gabriel Lugo with a session number 5. Hi, Gabriel.
Hello, everybody, formally. Um, Thank you for inviting me to this group and allowing me to be the one sort of guiding the surfing of this session, as I said before. Like you said, this is session 5, and as I said last time, I'm still without a computer. So we're going to go with the reading directly from the book, which a lot of people liked, and I actually enjoyed too. So we can go straight into it. Session 5 is actually pretty short, and it it's actually half a session if we can see the topic that we're discussing here. There's actually just two Q&As, meaning that there are two meaningful questions and answers. But the second answer or question and answer is pretty long. And I said, why not? We're going to read everything because in general, it's just pretty short. It's 3 pages at most, not even. But we were talking about in the last session, just as a refresher, we were talking about pyramids that led to the exploration of what the function or purpose of the pyramids were, and that was healing, initiation, and self-realization as we know it. So the process of self-realization requires in any methodology the seeing of the self as it is. And in that recognition, the dissolution of that which is not, and as an integration, the capacity to see the implications of this recognition in front of our conditioned mind. That's a very succinct way to describe the process that is self-realization, and healing is part of that. So healing is the way in which we harmonize the sense of being with truth. Truth being something that we can only see, that we can only understand directly. And that's the magic that we see in all mystical traditions and um, all practices that have to do with self-realization or the harmonizing of the self. Um, so I said that this is half a session, sort of, because the question is going to be about healing and what are the steps for healing. And we're going to talk about mind and body, and spirit is going to be for session 6 at the beginning. It's just going to be a short Q&A. But you will see that the most important part is always the mind, which is what's fascinating. The body is a result of the mind, and so it kind of shares the same qualities, even though there is a different dimension into which the body is being understood and is being harmonized as well. I think that's the word I'll probably use more often. So again, I'm just going to read everything, and I'm skipping the introduction of Ra. But just as a refresher, Don is saying in question 1, again, session 5, the last time we communicated, we were speaking of learning of healing. It is my impression that from what you gave to us in the earlier session, that it is necessary to first purify the self by certain disciplines and exercises. Then, in order to heal a patient, it is necessary, by example, and possibly certain exercises to create a mental configuration in the patient that allows him to heal himself. Am I correct? And I'll draw your attention to when Don says that in order to heal a patient, it is necessary, by example, and possibly certain exercises. Now, that's the part that Ron's going to correct here. As they say, although your learn understanding distortion is essentially correct, your choice of vibratory sound complex or words is not entirely as accurate as this language allows. This is something that I very much love about Ra, and is the constant refining of language to be as precise as possible. They continue saying it is not by example that the healer does the working. The working exists in and of itself. The healer is only the catalyst, much as this instrument has the catalysis necessary to provide a channel for our words, yet by example or exercise of any kind can take no thought for this working. The healing working is congruent in that it is a form of channeling some distortion of the intelligent infinity. This will become a little bit more clear as we move into the next question, and actually even more when we get to spirit in session 6. But a couple of things that the healer does not, we don't influence healing in other people by example or any other work directly on people, but rather to provide that, I'm going to call it direct insight. Yes, that's the way in which we harmonize self. In other words, and to put it simply, illness is confusion. Mental, in terms of, obviously, it stands out a lot. Spiritual seeking, yes. Spiritual seeking is confusion, as I always say. Crisis of identity. That's what spiritual seeking is. I don't know what I am. And so that is arising from a state of confusion, which is completely valid. And harmonizing confusion is not getting rid of confusion, it's harmonizing the patterns that create the confusion so clarity can shine. So this only happens by direct insight. There is no way that we can effectuate this on people by some sort of practice, exercise. It happens in and of itself, like Ross says. The working exists in and of itself. The healer is only the catalyst. So all we can do is provide catalyst, and the purity and the intention of that catalyst provides. Also, this is something that I'm going to mix here because this is something that goes in further sessions, but it's very, very important when we're talking about this energy exchange that causes the possibility of healing. And that is what Ross says, that the capacity for this energy transfer, which is mental, right, between teacher, students, is dependent upon the level of purity of the teacher and the capacity to be open of the student. So that's the dynamic that is necessary for efficiency. Yes. So yeah, it's speaking of stimulus, like I was saying before we started the session, that's the sort of stimulus that resonates inside, and that I was saying that it was sort of chaotic because it's a lot of vibration within the self. There's a lot of resonance, and that resonance needs to be integrated. So it seems chaotic, but it's just the way into which it just harmonizes itself over time through integration and just mental disciplines. So moving to question 2, which is going to take the rest of this session, or our session here. Don goes and says, we have decided to accept, if offered, the honor duty of learning and teaching the healing process. I would ask as to the first step, which we should accomplish in becoming effective healers. Ross says, we shall begin with the first of the 3 teaching learnings. This would be the mental one. And I want you to, if you're reading this, notice how much there is about mind, which takes a full page, and then just a couple of paragraphs on body. Here's where we're going to get the most out of what is healing and where does it start. They say, we begin with the mental learned teachings necessary for contact with intelligent infinity. I'm going to be pausing several times here because I want you to get those insights if possible. So the first sentence is, we begin with the mental learned teachings necessary for contact with intelligent infinity. In other words, everything that we're going to describe is the road to contact with intelligent infinity. What is contact with intelligent infinity? So they say the prerequisite of mental work is the ability to retain silence of self at a steady state when required by the self. The mind must be open like a door. The key is silence. Now, in American slang, I have some beef with spirituality because there's a lot of distraction as to mental disciplines and um, how to achieve this contact with divinity or realizing the self. And there's a lot of entertainment as to which we get from the different activities and practices and exercises that we do. And in the first paragraph here, we are talking about the prerequisite of mental work. And we're talking about silence. This silence sometimes is misconstrued as I need to get rid of my thoughts. I need to have no thoughts. I need to have a calm mind. I need to so and so so. This is an activity, an impossible activity from somebody that doesn't exist. So you can see the futility right away. There is no doer, and there is no such thing as silence of mind. It's almost like a still activity. Can anybody do a still activity? Nobody. So there's no such thing. And so this silence is the capacity for us to remain present in the midst of activity. That is the true silence. It is true that there are glimpses of that which is the stillness, right? Which is our essential self, that pure being, pure awareness. But it is not something that is achieved through some sort of effort. Effort can only create activity. So again, I would draw your attention a lot to this paragraph and contemplate what this silence is, pointing out the misconceptions that exist about, the void, silence, the nothingness, and so on. That sometimes the mind likes to objectify in one way or another. Continuing, they say within the door, right, the door of the mind, which the key is silence. Within the door lies an hierarchical construction you may liken unto geography in some ways, and in some ways geometry, for the hierarchy is quite regular, bearing inner relationships. This is to me, it speaks of the archetypical mind, which is a study in and of itself. It's simply the structure of our particular minds, and it becomes a lot more visible. This is the reason why even further down the material, and anybody who has undertaken this path can say it's not necessary to understand archetypical mind or structures and all these things, all these methods that exist. Although we can definitely get lost in trying to study Kabbalah, astrology, archetypical mind through tarot, and so on. Yes, it's a beautiful study, but it's not necessary. Why? Because anybody can navigate and perceive the constructs of the mind, and we have done it several times throughout history, and so that's why we have these methods. Helpful they are, yes. Necessary, they're not. This is within that door which we have opened with silence. It'll become very obvious, very, very obvious through continue to opening the mind and contact with intelligent infinity. So I made you contemplate a little bit the contact with intelligent infinity, what that means. And intelligent infinity is simply that pure being state. Being able to retain that silence, to not be drawn by the waves of the mind, identity, and so on. That's the constant seeking of intelligent infinity. This will also be supported by the mental, or rather, discipline of spirit in session 6. Now, how do we cultivate this? They say to begin to master the concept of mental discipline, it is necessary to examine the self. That's you. The polarity of your dimension must be internalized because we live in a state of abundant polarity, perceived polarity, what we call duality. We think that things are two. And because we think that things are two, we tend to buy into one. We have certain preferences. So they give us a short example here and say, where you find patience within your mind, you must consciously find the corresponding impatience and vice versa. Each thought that a being has in its turn an antithesis. The disciplines of the mind involve, first of all, identifying both those things of which you approve and those things of which you disapprove within yourself. Then balancing each and every positive and negative charge with its equal. The mind contains all things. Therefore, you must discover this completeness within yourself. To bring a very simplistic I would say, representation of these imbalances, notice that the mind creates biases and tendencies. Those biases and tendencies are always in favor of one polarity or another. We're masters at doing this. And little by little, our mind becomes very dependent on these biases and it becomes afraid of its opposites. And so it remains in a state of polarized mental perceptions of reality. And the use of polarity here to me is not speaking of ethical polarity, which is positive, negative polarization for spiritual growth, but rather just duality. We just get easily stuck with one or the other. And a very broad and surface level example of this is when somebody says, or rather, I would invite you to notice in your mind how something may come up and say, well, this is who I am, and I'm never changing. I'll never change that. I need to be this way. There is a reluctancy here to see the other side, to balance. And so when you do this, you're harmonizing yourself, and there is no, I am this, I am that. There's just equanimity with what is. That's the type of balancing. And we don't know how many of these imbalances we have until we look inside. And of course, by reflection with other people, we see what's being projected out of ourselves into others and how we judge reality, how we see an imbalance in reality. If you continue to see imbalance in reality, then of course there are things that are being invited you to go into this mental discipline, which is, once again, just to discover the completeness within yourself. A lot to be said here, so if you guys have questions and want to talk about it, we can get into this. But I'll continue. The second mental discipline, so that was the first one, just to look inside and find all these biases and tendencies. Yes, all those things that you approve and those that you disapprove within yourself. The second mental discipline is acceptance of the completeness within your consciousness. This is beautiful. This paragraph is just gorgeous. It is not for a being of polarity in the physical consciousness to pick and choose among attributes, thus building the roles that cause blockages and confusions in the already distorted mind complex. Each acceptance smooths parts or part of the many distortions that the faculty you call judgment engenders. This is the constructing of the separate self or ego, if you really, really read into it. And I'll repeat it. The second mental discipline is acceptance of the completeness within your consciousness. You guys see the disciplines of the personality here? Anybody? Yes? Know yourself, first step. Second, accept yourself. The second mental discipline is acceptance of the completeness within your consciousness. That was the result of the first step. It is not for a being of polarity in the physical consciousness, right? It is not for this being, this manifested being, to pick and choose among attributes, to select, I am this, I am that, that's the building of a personality, of what I am. Thus, building the roles, right? You're building roles that cause blockages and confusions in the already distorted mind complex. This is the building again of identity and the capacity that we have, because it's fun. Let's face it, it's fun to imagine that you're something. We all played as kids, but we had, at least as kids, the faculty of forgetting and not being identified with that. It's just for a game, it's playfulness. So yes, these are the blockages and confusions that begin to build in our minds. Now, each acceptance, which is this balancing exercise, smooths part of the many distortions that the faculty you call judgment engenders. So judgment, this also capacity that we have to judge and to categorize and enclose situations, people, behaviors, moralities, and so on. All of these are the result of building this structure for us as a sort of identity. And so each acceptance, which is, I cannot have one without the other. I'll give you a very simplistic example again. If I consider myself a good person, I'm such a good person because I do all of this. By default, I am creating the antithesis. And I'll be afraid of that because I'm identifying with being a good person. Well, guess what? For me to be a good person, there needs to be evil, because I'm not doing the evil, I'm doing the good things. So I'm a really good person. Yes. And so I'm now afraid of the evil, and I'll try to fight it. And you can see where that goes on. But if I know, that my behavior is just my behavior, and there are things that I wouldn't do, then I know that both things exist, and I'm not identified. I'm not developing a bias towards something. It's just something that naturally comes through. Again, we can continue to talk about this in several ways, but let's go to the third discipline of the mind, which is we're just going to repeat onto others, right? Knowing and accepting other selves. But these two, if they're clear, you'll understand the third and fourth one. They say the third discipline of the mind is a repetition of the first, but with the gaze outwards towards the fellow entities that it meets. In each entity, there exists completeness. Thus, the ability to understand each balance is necessary. When you view patience, you are responsible for mirroring in your mental understanding patience in patience. When you view impatience, it is necessary for your mental configuration of understanding to be impatience, patience. We use this as a simple example. Most configurations of mind have many facets, and understanding of either self polarities or you would call other self polarities can and must be understood as subtle work. I love that they say either understanding yourself or others, same thing, because it's just a reflection. That will be understood as subtle work. Again, it's a beautiful way to talk about the same thing that we say. If you want to change other people, you change yourself. By changing yourself, it's automatic because you understand the struggles, you understand the imbalances, you understand the tendencies of your mind, and by default, you will be able to understand everybody else, even if you don't understand what they're going through or don't know exactly what they're going through. So this mirrors they say it. The next step is the acceptance of the other self polarities, which mirrors the second step. That's the next step. That would be the fourth step. But the third step mirrors the same thing as the first one, if you notice. But instead of doing it with yourself, you're doing it with other selves. And the third is the fourth one, they don't explain it much, but they say the next step is the acceptance of the other self polarities, which is, again, a mirroring of the second step. just like we looked inside and we see all these biases and tendencies and we balance it out and then we accept that as the completeness of the self, we do the same with other selves. These are the first 4 steps of learning mental discipline. The 5th step involves observing the geographical and geometrical relationships and ratios of the mind, the other mind, the mass mind, the infinite mind. So once again, that's the deep study of what I would just call the archetypical mind for brevity. We can see many things come out of this understanding. We begin to see the collective consciousness working all together. We begin to see the influences, the interconnectedness of everything. So all of these are, to me, the geography that they're referring to here, which is great. You know, it's something that's fascinating. But the first 4 steps are, you know, the basis of this, of all of this, the foundation. So again, you can see how sometimes when we get into the spiritual, a lot of people, we become fascinated with the magical understanding that, wow, you know, there is a collective consciousness and how do we influence each other? And so we want to play with these understandings, and that's all well and good as long as we're doing the first 4 steps. It'll allow us to integrate, to be more harmonized, and be equanimous with the rest of the learnings that are derived from this exploration of mind. I'm just saying this to emphasize, to me, the importance of doing inner work. So that's the mind. We're going to move now into body. They say the second area of learned teaching is the study understanding of the body complexes. It is necessary to know your body well. This is a matter of using the mind to examine how the feelings, the biases, what you would call the emotions, affect various portions of the body complex. It shall be necessary to both understand the bodily polarities and to accept them, repeating in a chemical physical manifestation the work you have done upon the mind, bethinking the consciousness. To me, this reflects a lot, there's more to say here, of course, but this reflects a lot that what we find in the mind, we find in the body as well. It's not as complex as the mind because the mind contains all things, but the body has tendencies too. It has biases, and it wants to feel comfortable. It wants to feel fed and satisfied, and all these needs that arise, biological needs. And so we may develop some imbalances there too. This is a very general view, but these imbalances is the tilting of ourselves towards one state, and just like before, a sort of fear to balance with the others. So this is very independent, of course, and it depends on the analysis of all the things that our body is used to, that comfort, that those pleasures, those satisfactions, those things that the body is so used to um, for finding that supposed harmony, and how we subject our body to certain things because we think that that's what's going to bring me peace and satisfaction, harmony. So they continue saying the body is a creature of the mind's creation, something that we see reflected in the material at least 1 or 2 more times. I'll give some insight about this too. It has its biases. The biological bias must be first completely understood, and then the opposite bias allowed to find full expression and understanding. Again, the process of acceptance of the body as a balanced as well as polarized individual may then be accomplished. I may be a little bit too simplistic here with this, but if we have a tendency, for example, towards always eating, and this is just my experience as well, I have so many stories in terms of, I think they qualify as eating disorder. But we develop these imbalances. And I'll speak for myself when I say that, for example, just eating constantly. I was a bodybuilder for years, and that's the constant eating, eating, eating. And so the idea of fasting, for example, was something that I said, oh, no, don't, I'm going to lose so much. And it's not just a mental idea; it's just how the body responds to its antithesis, to its opposite. So, yeah, uh, small things like that. Pleasure is another thing. There's no use to pleasure. And again, I'll speak by experience. The constant seeking for sexual satisfaction, for example, it's another one that we can get into, and it results into the inability to see its opposite, right? So if you begin to see here, we see this reflected in our traditions and cultures. There is extreme asceticism, right, where we subject ourselves to just denial of pleasures, denial of satisfaction and comfort, and just explore the extreme. And some people do that, but that's not the way. The way is balance, you see. And so somebody 2,600 years ago called Gautama Siddhartha, he went on this trip for years, 7 years or so, extreme asceticism, because he thought he was going to find enlightenment there. And in the end, he said, oh no, it's a balance between these two. So, same thing. So, the body, again, is a creature of the mind. And the insight that I wanted to share is that the body is being created by the mind. It's not the other way around, as we think in materialism. So, it's a reflection of the mind. We look inside the mind, we see, as Ross says, well, this is a matter of using the mind to examine how the feelings, the biases, or what we call emotions, affect various portions of the body complex. Some people do this also with energy center, right? Chakra visualization and seeing where is the attention going when you do this or that. That's helpful, I think. There are many methods, but at its foundation, it's mental impressions that go into the body. And when I look back at my eating disorders in the past, I could see that uh, it was fabricated in the mind first, and then my body would respond as a consequence. Same with sexual pleasure, something that was conditioned in my mind to find that peace and love and happiness through the sexual act and the beauty of the orgasm and so on. You kind of condition your body also to be that way. But it starts in the mind, so it reverts back again to the mind. So much to say here, but I'll continue. It is then the task to extend this understanding to the bodies of the other selves whom you will meet. Yes, it doesn't stop with us. We have to look outside. And if you feel like you're perfectly balanced and you're all cool and fine and dandy, but then you look outside and you say, look at this non-spiritual guy. This guy, my family members, oh, they have so much to advance. Then you got to go back to step one. So you have to see it outside. You have to understand yourself to understand others. The simplest example of this is the understanding that each biological male is female, each biological female is male. This is a simple example, and yes, it is, but it illustrates the same thing. Just like when I said, I'm a good person. Well, you have created a lot of bad people just by you being a good person. Um, you have to face that now. However, in almost every case wherein you are attempting the understanding of the body of self or other self, you will again find the most subtle discernment is necessary in order to fully grasp the polarity complexes involved. This, I'm going to bring it to crystallization because there's a point where once you understand that this is the work that goes forever, there's just further crystallization of what we see in the energy systems as energy centers or chakras. So it's not like we're constantly, as some traditions, which you can see why, this sort of harsh discipline, and saying I am a sinner, mortification of the flesh, or extreme asceticism, is it's a bit distorted, but it is the truth. That means that we are never at a final stage. There's never a full blown, me, the perfect one. I just feel that it's seen some time, and I don't think this is the case with any of you, but I'll just mention it because I can. We have to be very mindful to understand that we are perfect as we are right now from the vertical view. The vertical view is that you are the best version that you are at this point. That doesn't mean that you are the best version ever and ultimate, but rather that this is perfect as it is in the vertical, but because we have a horizontal line, experiential continuum, I'm sorry, then there is a crystallization, there is a flowering. I call it a flowering. It's just, it never stops. And that's when I would say, it's this work. When they say that you will find that the most subtle discernment is necessary in order to fully grasp the polarity complexes involved. Because that's what it is. We create all of this drama in life so we can harmonize it. In other words, if we think that we've reached a point, which a lot of people tend to believe, looking from the separate self, that we have arrived at the most terrible state. Well, no, this is the peak, the climax of the creator in this planet, is to believe, the strong belief that we're going to be annihilated, that we're going to destroy ourselves. And there's so much drama in the world, rightly so from one perspective, but from this one, it's all good, it's all well. And if we can see that, we begin to change reality from a point that no other activist will ever do, because we're changing it from the inside out. We're not playing with the cogs and machinery involved outside, which is just an expression of our inner view. And that's about it. I'm not going to read the rest. They're just saying, at this time, we suggest closing the description until the next time of work so that we may devote time to the third area commensurate with its importance. In other words, we don't have time to talk about spirit right now, so let's finish it. And we'll talk about it later in another session, which they did the next day in session 6. And then just the finishing question of, is the instrument comfortable? Anything else that we can do to increase her comfort? That's all. Some directions, and just because it's so beautiful, I'll say, I am Ra. I leave this instrument in love and light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one creator, Adonai. And that officially concludes the reading of session 5. Lately, I've been reflecting a lot, not on the content here, but rather in the way they always say, see you later. And where do we leave you? In the power and the peace of the one infinite creator. Since we talked about contact with intelligent infinity, that's what they refer to. That state of full acceptance of this experience, which is always there. It requires absolutely nothing that we have to do. And again, as I mentioned and suggested, the key is silence. And it's just, I'm going to call it the silence of the separate self saying this or that, the separate self trying to dominate, control, or do anything. Silence that, and all that remains is stillness and movement. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Anyone wanted to comment on that one or ask questions? Feel free to do so now. Yeah, actually love that concept of know yourself, accept yourself, and become the creator, because it's so deep and is for me a lifetime task. And you can apply it, and that formula you can apply it on your daily life. I used to remind me when I have difficulties in the daily routine or to tackle catalysts, and Very helpful.
Yeah, and if I can actually throw in my 2 cents on that, which is really what my life work is dedicated to, the disciplines of the personality. It's not a difficult thing. In fact, it requires very little effort, or rather, no effort. And I always say that if I say know yourself, um, I'm not suggesting that you know the personality that you are, because that would take you forever. And because it changes every day, you won't be able to keep track of it, and you'll never know yourself. You'll know change, you'll know fluctuation. But when we say know yourself, then what you are must be something that you can know now, and it will never change. That's permanence. That's the true self. So know your true self. It goes in line perfectly with acceptance, which is the second step, because as you know yourself, or when you know yourself, which is self-realization, it's not a big thing. It's not pompous. It's not magnanimous. It's not exuberant. Is very simple understanding. And knowing yourself, which is the basis of everything else, then you're able to stand, as it were, in a point in which this which is coming, all these things that need to be balanced or harmonized, are you're not being dragged by them, you see? So it's immediate that you accept yourself. In other words, when you know yourself, acceptance is automatic. When we invest ourselves, which is what we're so used to with characters in the mind, um, acceptance is not possible, because we are to be something is to be polarized, to be invested in one polarity. So we're always going to see the other one as opposite from us, you see. But if you're able to see two polarities, then that's a clear sign that you yourself do not depend on polarities. So again, that's the playfulness of this that I find. It's just knowing yourself is the prerequisite for acceptance. Acceptance is what happens once you know yourself. And rather, I would say that is the struggle that we seem to find with acceptance is that we are so used to be in the state of resistance, which is the separate self. So you see, it seems like a struggle because we have we are unaware of how much we identify with a separate self that by default is resistant. So if you look at true self, separate self is resistant. So it seems like a struggle to accept yourself. However, true self is pure acceptance. See the difference? So know yourself is establishing yourself in acceptance. And even that is saying too much, but it illustrates a point, hopefully. Um, and it's just a constant recognition. I always say that to everybody who likes to exchange this dialogue with me. It's a constant recognition. You don't have to wait until, whoa, when I get home, I'm gonna sit and meditate. No, do it now. Why wait until the perfect moment when you're burning incense and you're sitting in lotus position? You can do it now. Always do it now. There's no need to wait. So the more you revisit your true self, it just becomes a more automatic acceptance. And once again, I talk from experience. I do the same here. It's a natural harmonizing. And I'll add this. Sorry, Tad, I've extended myself a little bit, but I'll add this too. There's the acceptance. It's not like you're nobody. You're nothing. Is that what's coming through? You're so able to be in harmony with whatever's coming through. It could be conflict. It could be whatever. Anger, emotions are rising, but because you're not interfering and resisting, they just simply come and go, and there is no problem. You don't see a problem. That's the beauty of this. That, Tatiana.
Thank you. Actually, I was just today. I got some video in which was exactly mentioned this, not this session we were talking about today, but exactly the message about it, and which was like, in the moment you just wake up in this dream and you start to be conscious, like every single decision you choose is because you choose it, and no one, literally no one, took the decision about you. Is in the moment you are awake, and also in the moment you reckon that nobody, like literally nobody, is guilty because what you are doing or what is happening to you. So I was like really thinking about that, the two things, which are basically everything, you know, like, yeah. So every single decision I took, finally I took it because it was I was the one who did it. And also everything that is happening to me, it was not my mom the one was guilty about what is happening right now to me. It was not my sister. So it's just myself. I was thinking about like how, in which point of your life actually can you be innocent? Because I remember, I know that that's going to come in a coming session, till which point you start to be literally conscious, until which point you are totally innocent and you are able to take your own decisions. Because I believe like babies, they don't have decisions, they just experience itself, you know, like they do everything they want, they cry as long as they want, they're happy as long as they want, they are just like totally conscious beings. And then in which point we somehow start to get tangled in this, like, oh no, I did that because my mom said that to me, or, you know, like, I'm not guilty that right now I do not have money, you know, like I just earn less money. So I'm thinking about like this combination about like mind, body, and spirit. And from when on, you can literally say, I'm totally conscious. I know that this experience is just because I created that one. And you said that also, Gabriel, to this martyr role, like, oh my God, I'm going to punish myself. I'm so bad. I'm not doing this well. But by the other hand, also to be like grateful because you are here. You landed finally in the period of time you can reckon this. So though is the duality there, because without this duality, we were not able to experience our now, right?
Is that the question? Like uh, about duality and us residing in duality?
It's more like this innocence part about us. Like, are we literally, can we somehow, as human beings, like adults right now, the whole of us in this round, can be somehow go again to be innocent of what is happening and experience our full consciousness now?
So let's do an exercise. I want you to wait for the next thought to arrive. Don't think about anything, just wait for the next thought.
Thank you, Gabriel. Tatiana, do you have any
Good.
follow-up question?
I'm
She
literally,
can, she's waiting for the next thought.
I was
So
no.
the natural state of being present or aware. There are many ways we can call this: being in the presence of God, being in the flow, all of this. That's innocence. That's just the foundation of who we are. Because we're so used to thinking as a separate being, we think that by some great effort is that we're finally going to go back to innocence or go back to the child's mind. And it's only by the activity of our own mind, which uh, you said, yes, we live in this mental construct that distracts us from there. It's only by that it just seems like something extraordinary that's going to happen. So the question is, why am I distracted so much? What's distracting my mind so much that I cannot stay in this state? That's not to say that you cannot have thoughts, because thoughts are helpful, right? Our thoughts are helpful for resolving day-to-day things. And the decisions that we take, it's not like the separate self. See where the decisions are being made. Can you fully track a decision that you make? No, you can't. It's just it's a long string of considerations and everything just coming, and it's just what you're prone to deciding. So to be aware of that is to be free of the decision making, and you know that that's what's being decided, and you follow it. And because you are not responsible for it, you're able to discern better. And so what happens? Certain behaviors that you know that they are a bit destructive, by you disconnecting from you, the one making the decision. And you can see the difference. If you go with it and you say, oh, I'm making this decision again, and I know it's destructive to me, but I can't help it, and so on. That's identifying with the stream of thoughts. You're liable to get caught again in the loop. Whereas if you just cut the identity with it and just say, there is a decision, I'm doing it, and I'm exploring what's happening, I'm just looking at it, you'll begin to see better. So that's a disconnection from the idea that we are taking decisions all the time, but rather the decisions are being made and you're aware of what's happening. And that state of innocence is precisely what is required for this. In the other hand, or on the other hand, when you're invested in this identity, you're a victim or you're guilty of what's happened. Yes. So there is no innocence there. You're entering victimhood mentality. So one of the things that I tend to take for granted, but thank you for bringing it up, is to explore the subtle ways that the mind makes us feel guilty or a victim. We do this all the time. We grow up with that mentality. We were impressed with these views. You are responsible, you are a victim, and you are guilty. So disconnecting from that and just being present as it is. Like I said, wait for the next thought. And you can breathe this. Just breathe the presence that is there.
Though it's exactly like exactly the point. Because somehow you need to reckon that guiltiness and then processes again and say like, okay, maybe I was guilty of all my decisions, but those are anymore there. Because I think that the second thought it comes again, it's like past, and not present. It was the past, it's not your present. Of course, that has some repercussions about your present and maybe about your future. But indeed, for me, for Liz, my experience is reckon exactly that about yourself is the hardest process of acceptance.
Yeah, I'm gonna refute that by clarifying it even more if I can. because you started with a sentence of saying, maybe I did this in the past. You're ascribing too much reality to a separate self that does things. You see? So once again, if he just recognize that things simply are, right? There is no need to superimpose now, maybe I did this in the past, but I am not this anymore. You see, I'm trying to bring it to the lowest level of implications of a self acting and doing, but rather to see simply that things are, there's a tendency, there's an inertia. You see, Ra says this is karma. Karma is riding this wave. Yes, you yourself riding the wave of inertia, because only by investing yourself in the inertia can you give it more power. Karma is action that requires more action or identity with that action to continue to keep it going. So I would amputate anything, anything that involves me as a doer in the past, in the present, in the future. I would cut out completely that and just look at the inertia. So how do you stop the wheel of karma, says Ra? Forgiveness. What is forgiveness? To say, I forgive this? No. Forgiveness is just to let go. That's what the word means. Just let go. Just another word for acceptance. So, yeah, what you say is it's true in the sense that, sure, I'm no longer that, only because I recognize that I never was. So it brings it out to a simpler, I'm hesitant to call it practice. I will go back to recognition. Because if you recognize that you're just a pure awareness of what's happening, I mean, do it now. Are you responsible for creating the world? Yes and no. There is no separate self that is creating it, but you are the one responsible for creating this. Do you make decisions for that? You don't. It's happening. So if this was a runaway situation in which you are responsible, maybe why we can see that this is, what creates psychotic episodes. Possibly. You're responsible for everything that's happening. You're involved. But no, if I look at nature and I'm just there, I'm not responsible for anything. Things are happening. Why is there a difference in my mind where I look at the landscape, the geography that Ron's talking about, perhaps, and be responsible for that, as opposed to just me being the witness of what's happening? So you see where I'm getting at? The more you return to just basic awareness, pure awareness, the fear is of the separate self saying, my God, I'll be lost, my personality, all the things that I love. Try it. That's why I said, wait for the next thought. What's happening? Whoa. This.
Thank you. So I will just delete the anchor of everything. Like supreme
Cutting
down.
the cords.
Yeah. Thank you for the aha moment.
Thank you for your question, Bettina. So, anyone else wanted to comment something or wanted to say something? Otherwise, I would ask Gabriel to give us some closing words or maybe a forecast for the next session. What we be expecting there?
Sure. I think I'll be able to honor the first petition, not the second one. So I don't remember what session 6 has, but at the very least, we'll be covering the spirits. It's going to be interesting because this is the first session that we have that's quite long. Um, I guess as a group, it'll be nice to decide what we want to do, but we can discuss that later because longer sessions, we either don't do as much honor and just cover briefly everything. Maybe everybody can just study it and be prepared, or we segment it into different sessions. So, but at the very least, we're going to talk about spirits and other things. I feel unprepared to answer that question. But I will honor the first petition. Final words. I keep going back to the first paragraph. Everything else is just, exercises for balancing yourself, which are beautiful. They're very, as Ra is to the core of things. But just this part speaks to the heart. And I'll actually, if I can, I'll elaborate a little bit on this, because I have an affinity to show this to every spiritual seeker. I'm going to reread it, and then we'll go to my contribution. They say, we begin with the mental learned teachings necessary for contact with intelligent infinity. This confused self is going to intelligent infinity. Why? Because that's how we start. That's how mental work is. It unfolds, rather. Mental work unfolds as a function of contact with intelligent infinity. So what is it? The prerequisite of mental work is the ability to retain silence of self at a steady state when required by the self. The mind must be open like a door. The key is silence. Again, big confusion throughout thousands of years, debates, philosophical debates that have, they arise from this misconception of saying, what is this silence? And like I said, it is the capacity for silencing the separate self, which is not really, it's the cutting of that cord of identifying with experience. And so you are just present on anything that's happening. That's the silence. There is no such thing as pure silence. Activity is, yes, actually, I'm lying, and I'll just say for completion, there is a possibility of pure silence, is that what we call deep sleep or samadhi. But don't confuse those with the ultimate states. That is a misconception. And a lot of mystics and spiritual seekers, they aim towards that, and they feel that that is the ultimate state. That is wrong. The ultimate state is to be able to be fully present in activity, in mental work, physical work, everything, just being present, allowing everything. So silence is that. And like I said, every single mystical tradition, it's not that they get it wrong, it's that it is liable to be mistaken for the seeking of that silence. And sometimes, there's a lot of philosophical debates. Christians, for example, in hesychasm, which is one of the most beautiful Eastern Christian traditions for meditation, contemplation, and just seeking the self, they entered a sort of stage into there was a debate as to, well, you can't say that's God because God cannot be experienced. And all of this arises just from the notion that, yes, arriving there, it's something incredible. Nobody can get there. So they have to work around with their philosophy. It doesn't need to be this way. It's just to recognize that what you are essentially is the presence or the awareness of what's happening. There is no separate self there. Cannot find it. No thought, no problem. Thoughts, no problem either. It's just the thought that is superimposed and says, I am responsible for this. I carry all this baggage from the past. I did this. Now I am restoring it. I am moving towards divinity. Krishnamurti said, I is the first and last freedom. It's a portal. The moment you say I, you stand out and you go into the world. And the moment you explore where the I comes from, you're capable of going inside. Contact with intelligent infinity, just knowing that I refers to awareness. That's your name. Your name is I. Everybody calls themselves I. And I refers to space, medium, or awareness in which everything appears. Stay with that, and that's all that is required. The rest is the unfolding of the mental work, crystallization as we know it, and just enjoying life. Like I said at the beginning, and I'll close with this, enjoying life is not staying in a catatonic state or exploring samadhi. Enjoying life is just that which is around you right now, the way you feel, the things you do, the people you interact with. Find the joy in that. There's plenty of it. Or like Ross says, find the love in the moment, or the moment contains love. That's it. It's brimming with love. We just need to see it.
A beautiful closing words. Thank you very much. I think there's nothing to add for that one. Thank you very much, Gabriel, and I'm very excited and looking forward for next week.
Thank you for making this happen, Daniel, and everybody else who's here for